This is Jeff Koinange live tonight. If it's Wednesday, you know it's all about politics 101, the state of the nation. Where are we? By the way, we're very concerned about the youth. That's where we are right now. Which way forward? Because after a poll a few weeks ago, 60% of young people said they wouldn't mind getting into corruption as long as they didn't get arrested. Very worrying figures, and we have to find out why. My guest tonight is a man, I tell you, he left a plush job, if you will. Yep. When you work for an organization like Oxfam, and you come back home and you work for an outfit called International Society for Development, well, you have something in mind. And this is all about helping the young people, especially in this country. This man was, about a year ago, was arrested while trying to defend the Langata Primary School. Remember that story? Arrested in front of the cameras, dragged down, up and down the field, dumped into a police car. And I tell you, he's been fighting since then. That's his mission right now, helping young people in this country, and a whole bunch of things. He's a good friend of mine. He just turned 50 years old a couple of days ago. He's joined our league. He is none other than Irungu Houghton, and his Twitter handle is at Irungu Houghton. Mine is at Koinange Jeff. Let's use the hashtag Politics 101. Irungu Houghton. Good to see you, brother.
Nice to be back.
And happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Happy 50th.
Thank you.
Welcome to the 50s. How's it feel?
I'm all grown up.
It took a while.
No. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for inviting me back on the show.
It's great to have
the show, you had to get arrested to come on the show. So I'm really glad that I've not been arrested recently and I've been invited back. So that's good. I thought it was actually a show for recovering jailbirds.
But you know what, Irungu, you might get arrested after this show, so
probably, I guess
don't hold your breath.
Okay, my lawyers are waiting.
Irungu, I mentioned about that poll, which really disturbed me. 60% of you saying they wouldn't mind getting involved in corrupt deals, as long as they didn't get arrested. What does that say about the state of our country?
We're seeing a tremendous decay of, a decay of moral values right across the board. But I think I wouldn't blame the youth. I think the youth are basically seeing what is happening at much higher levels of society. And I think the leadership needs to take full responsibility for the lack of role models, for the behavior that they are demonstrating when they take public office. And as a result, the petty corruption that we're seeing on our streets and in our boardrooms and so on, all of that is really a consequence of a country that actually does not believe that it pays not to pay somebody.
And then on top of that, Irungu, we hear allegations, Supreme Court judges being bribed 200 million shillings. We hear whistleblowers coming out of the woodworks. It looks like the hyenas are turning on themselves, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think when the Judicial Service Commission brought out their report, and there was a lot of angst within the country about, is our judiciary so corrupt that it no longer is able to manage the rule of law effectively. And what I said to people was that no, actually it's a good day for the country, because what we have is a judgment that clearly shows that there were two major irregularities that happened with Justice Tunui, and therefore the recommendation to the President that he sets up a tribunal was a good day for this country. What was bad for this country is what happened several months ago or a year ago, when this alleged transfer of 200 million or $2 million took place.
Yeah, and it could be more than that. It could have been as much as $3 million.
As big as a briefcase.
Correct. Yeah, big briefcase. But what does that say about the state of our country, Rungu? I mean, is everyone up for sale? Is that what they're saying?
No, I believe actually most Kenyans are decent people. I think most Kenyans believe in the value of hard work. I think most Kenyans believe that they should get a just return for what they put in. And what we're seeing really is the actions of a few people that are essentially capturing the press, capturing our imagination. And that's what I think is wrong with this country. We do not see enough good things happening in this country on our television screens, and we don't tell those stories. We tell stories of doom and gloom.
Absolutely. But let's face it, Irungu, if the hyenas in the trough, and this trough that they're feeding on, if the lesser hyenas hadn't been paid their monies, they wouldn't have squealed.
No,
if they had been paid, they wouldn't have squealed.
No, in the case of the NYS scandal, which is now becoming, you know, a soft version of Narco or the House of Cards in the American context, you know. If that is anything to go by, what I was most shocked by was not so much the, I guess, the interaction between the allegations between Josephine Kangura and Waiguru now, but really what I was really worried about was the systematic dismantling of institutions and policies to ensure that corruption could take place, if this is all true. The use of banking fraud department staff, the forgeries in terms of bank slips. I mean, this is sophisticated, collusion in that way. It means that actually, until we clean this up, none of us are safe. Absolutely.
And when you thought that the Supreme Court was the last barrier, if you will, the last bastion of morality, and then it's all allegedly so corrupt, maybe even, you know, more than just Justice Turi, maybe there are others in there. That it doesn't augur too well, huh?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, in a sense, what I've seen with the judiciary is they've taken a number of steps to clean themselves up. For example, you've seen a Deputy Chief Justice removed from office because of corruption. I've not seen anything like that, as graphic as that, happening within the executive or within, for that matter, the legislative. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority presented a report to the Speaker of the Assembly that showed the depth of rot within the Assembly. That report was not even debated. In fact, if anything, the Speaker almost was censured by the Assembly for bringing that report to the House. Now, my sense is, you've seen 56 judicial officers being sent on compulsory leave within the judiciary. You've seen this case come up, and one thing we have to say is that the Chief Justice did act swiftly to set up this JSC. And I think the JSC has made its recommendation. I was disappointed with the President's response, which is that he's not going to set up the tribunal, because this was a real opportunity to seize this where it was. Now, whether the other 4 Supreme Court judges were involved, I don't think there's any evidence yet. I mean, we have one lawyer saying that he has evidence to that effect, but he's not tabled that. So I wouldn't go as far as some people are saying that we should scrap the whole bench.
You don't say that?
No. I don't think so.
Keep it as is.
No, I think we have to follow up. What I would ask each of those court judges, all the Supreme Court judges, to do is to immediately subject themselves to a lifestyle audit. And let's look at their banks. Let's look at who their lawyers are. Let's look at the real estate that they've acquired over the last couple of years. I think that's the way to proceed with this. Not simply to say that we think that he received 200 million and then handed it out 50 million each to each of the judges. We know children who receive things receive sweets on behalf of a class and then proceed to eat those sweets by themselves. It's not necessarily the case that this went to 4 other judges. It's not proven.
With 3 Supreme Court judges, may be scheduled to leave by the middle of the year. Chief Justice Willie Mutunga, Tunui was going anyway, and maybe Lawal might agree in the end. That's almost half the Supreme Court.
I think that would be healthy in the sense that it would allow for fresh blood to come into the Supreme Court. It would also restore faith and credibility among those parts of the country that feel that the Supreme Court judges as a community were unfair in terms of the judgments they made on the political grades. And I think that's really important as we go into the elections. So it is important that this is happening now rather than 2 or 3 months before the elections, because we can allow that institution to become much more, I guess, for Kenyans to absorb that this change has happened. And therefore take the judgment if we have to go back to have a appeal on the elections.
Bottom line, is all this what we're seeing unfold literally daily out there in the headlines? Is it good for democracy in this country?
So everything you see in the news, every corruption you see, there will be a whistleblower. Right? Every scandal that you see, there will be somebody who courageously came forward and shared information or blew a whistle. So I always say that there are 2 sides to this. Even when you see in the most darkest points of our history, there were always people moving in the background, trying to put pieces together and to expose the forces of darkness. And I think that's always been the case. That's the case now. It's the case in the NYS saga, and it will be the case in the future. What we need to really think more seriously about is why we don't see a sense of outrage from more people. Why is it that we allow this bombardment of corruption scandals and we don't take action?
And the most disappointing part, for me at least, is that there's never follow through. We talk for 1, 2, 3 days. Kenyans on social media will make all the noise that they can make. By day 3, day 4, it's gone.
I have a friend who says that, Jeff, we're a country of topics. There will be one along any minute. So we'll digest this topic, and then tomorrow there'll be another one, and then there'll be another one, you know. So I think the thing is consistency and a certain amount of persistence that allows us to take one issue through to its logical conclusion. So in terms of the government, for example, the government in many cases is caught playing defense. So they're having to arrest people last minute. They're not actually going on the offensive and creating the structures. We saw 17 or 18 presidential directives announced in November last year. But even that has kind of disappeared from the public imagination. We don't know what's happening. What happened to the business code of ethics? Now, we know things are happening, but I think the communication of this is actually so limp and quiet that actually the public doesn't get a sense of confidence that something that was announced is actually being followed through. And just to give example, something that I'm very familiar with, which is the titling of schools. A year ago, I got arrested with a colleague by the name of Boaz Waruku. We were basically reclaiming the Langata Road Primary School. We waited 2 months or so after the president announced that all schools would have titling, and then discovered in March that only 301 schools had applied for titling in response to the president.
Only 301?
Only 300.
Out of?
19,000 schools, primary and secondary.
Right.
So we formed a coalition. A number of us went. We approached the National Land Commission. We approached the Ministry of Lands and Education, and we started saying, how do we accelerate the applications? We spoke at several meetings of head teachers, and by August we had something like 7,500 schools having submitted their applications for title deeds.
What happens next? What's the next step?
So the National Land Commission has to then look at this, check that all the documents are in order, and what they've done now is they've been able to identify 2,400 schools that are ready for titling. That process is underway. We have commitments from the Governor of Nairobi, from the Ministry of Lands, and also the Ministry of Education that this 2,000 or so schools by March 31st will have their titles. And in that sense, the tears that were cried in Langata by those children essentially will find something that was worth the victory.
Was Langata Road Primary School part of it?
I think Langata Road was the turning point. I think it was the turning point for a lot of us who were basically seeing things happening and then not willing to take action. We've recorded something like about 25 other actions taken by school children or by management committees or by alumni and parents and teachers association. Just December the 19th, my wedding day, I was looking at the news and then discovered that Lavington Primary School, a 51-year-old school, had essentially 2 acres about to be cut out of it in exactly a copycat action to Langata Road Primary School. December the 19th, head teachers out on leave, their schools are closed, the teachers have left the premises. It was one solitary guard who called the head teacher and said, there are tippers and there are excavators and they're about to take the 2 acres of our land. And the area member of parliament, Simbarati, was called. He brought a bunch of parents, a bunch of young people, and they basically pushed back this attempt, which then allowed for several things to start happening. So the Senator of Nairobi, Sonko, has actually filed an injunction on the company that has actually tried to attempted to grab the land. And the National Land Commission and the Ministry of Lands have visited the school essentially to walk the perimeter of that school, and they've declared that that school is not for sale.
Good Lord.
And that's the action that we need Kenyans to take.
Have there been schools where slicing of land has happened?
Well, Naka Primary School in Nakuru, 10 acres out of 12.
Gone.
Attempted. The head teacher, the management committee basically pushed back against it, and they got a judgment from, or rather a determination from the National Land Commission that the title that had been irregularly given to a company for that school was going to be revoked.
What does that say about us, Irungu? Does that say that we are just prostitutes to power and greed and money?
83% of our schools currently have no title deeds.
83?
83%. 41% of the schools that are being grabbed not by high-level politicians, but by neighboring communities or management committee members or head teachers, but essentially people in the community. So the first thing we need to recognize is that, first of all, we need to give legal guarantees to schools to ensure that nobody can just walk in with a title deed today or tomorrow. The second thing we need to do is we need to educate the communities around those schools that essentially they own those schools. Those schools belong to the community. And once that is clear, and once the boundaries are clarified, do you know how many? Do you know what percentage of head teachers know their school boundaries in Nairobi?
Go on.
A tenth.
A tenth. They have no clue.
90% of head teachers in Nairobi don't know the actual boundaries of their schools. They don't even know if they're going to lose land.
I guess the question I was trying to ask you, Irungu,
Right.
is nothing sacred anymore?
Behavior is behavior. Nothing is sacred. I don't think there is anything that we've seen. I mean, we've seen reverends and pastors essentially extorting money from their congregation. We've seen secondary school teachers being bribed in order to take children. We've seen NGO leaders taking bribes from people for jobs. So every sector is affected, and that's why it needs a real social transformation of values. And you know, the only place we have to look is in the Constitution. I mean, it's not that we have to invent these moral values. They are actually enshrined in our Constitution. Integrity is a clear value within our Constitution.
Bottom line, do you get frustrated when you try, you know, when you feel what you're trying to do something, but it's one step forward, two steps backwards?
Yeah, I've just turned 50, Jeff, so you know, frustration is not healthy for me. You get ulcers, you get you get high blood pressure, heart attack.
Yeah.
So I choose actually not to be frustrated, and it's a choice rather than a feeling. I think the more that we can act based on faith rather than fear, the more that we can take action on the things that really matter to us, the more free we feel in terms of what we do. I turned 50 and I really felt that I found my purpose. I found my purpose in life. I'm not being frustrated. I'm not going to complain because I'm not powerless. You know, and the things that I have no power over, I just need to get bigger and become powerful. You know, so in a sense, we don't have to be frustrated.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that after the break, Irungu, because you know, a lot of people do get frustrated.
Sure.
A lot of people lose hope.
Sure.
A lot of hopeless people out there who just don't know what's the way forward in a country where, you know, it's a free-for-all.
Right.
Let's talk about that after the break. Goodness gracious me, 50-year-olds are smart people. Well, some. At Irungu Houghton, at Koinange Jeff, the hashtag Politics 101. We're trying to make some sense of all the sanity that's going on out there. It looks like for the most part, the inmates have taken over the asylum. Oh my, woman! Jeff Koinange live at the Villa Rosa Kempinski takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.